play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Live from Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Radio, Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. And this show is going to be great, a lot to love. A couple of very cool guys from a very cool company. Going to be talking about a very cool game. Before we get to them, just do my housekeeping notes here, and then we'll jump right in. First of all, thanks so much for listening. I'm Shane Stacks, your host, right here on Live Geek Talk Radio, and it is Live Geek Talk Radio, so feel free to call in if you have questions or comments for our guests. It's 501-823-0965. That's 501-823-0965. Or you can tweet me at Shane Plays. So, sometimes we get a lot of callers, sometimes we don't. But these guys are really interesting. So whether you call in or not, make sure to tune in and keep listening because this is going to be a great show. So don't forget, I always put the show notes for the show up on the website at shaneplays.com. That's ShanePlays.com. So if you have want to know more, you're like, hey, what were they talking about? Or I want to know more about the guest. And there's also a giveaway I'm about to mention. There's a link there. Go to shaneplays.com and look for the show notes. The show does go out as a podcast after the live show. And within, this week, I don't think it went out till Thursday. But I usually try to get it out Monday, Tuesday, something like that. But that'll go out on the blog at shaneplays.com. It's also on iTunes and Stitcher and other fine podcast directories. Not to mention, I put it up on YouTube at the youtube.com/GoShanePlays. Make sure to subscribe to that YouTube channel if you haven't. There's a lot of good stuff on there. Also, don't forget, we're a week delayed on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is SciFi for your Wi-Fi. That's KryptonRadio.com. All right, I'm about to introduce my guest. Before I do that, I want to remind everybody we have a giveaway going on right now. Our Shane Plays sponsor, Troll Lord Games, who does the Castles and Crusades tabletop RPG, has given us a player's handbook to give away. So if you want a Castles and Crusades player's handbook, there's a link on the show notes, or you could just go to Facebook and look for the Shane Plays Facebook page, and there's a post there that has a picture of their player's handbook. All you have to do is like and share that post. You don't have to like the page, although I'd love it if you did, but all you got to do is like and share that post. You're going to be automatically entered into the giveaway for that Castles and Crusades player's handbook. So go to Facebook, look for Shane Plays, or just go to the shaneplays.com and look for the show notes, and the link is there. So we don't have a news segment this week because I wanted to give these guys plenty of time. An hour goes really quick in radio. So there's no news segment. So we're not going to get to listen in to our hardworking news team today. We're going to jump right in. I want to introduce my guests. I've got, and I hope I'm going to say the names right, Colin McComb and George Ziets from
Ziets.
George Ziets from inXile Entertainment. And there's a huge pedigree to this company. And the game they're working on is Torment, Tides of Numenera, which is a spiritual successor to the incredibly well-known and popular and beloved Planescape Torment. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So Colin and George, first of all, welcome so much to the show. And
thank you.
Yeah, and you're welcome. And we're also breaking ground today on the show today. We've had Skype calls before, but this is the first Skype conference call. So if any gremlins strike, we apologize in advance. But so far everything's going really well, and I'm really glad to have these guys. You have no idea how, sometimes I step out of my radio host mode and go into fanboy mode. I'm fanboying today because these guys are working on some extremely cool stuff. And if you research their biographies, they've worked on some really cool stuff. If you're into computer role-playing games at all, these guys are heavy hitters. So I guess let's I'll let you both introduce yourselves, and let's start with George. Kind of tell us a little bit about what you do with inXile and maybe a little bit of your background, and then we'll do the same thing with Colin.
Sure. So I've been doing games for about 15 years. I started actually in MMOs, but then I made the transition over to RPGs, which was really what I loved doing. Worked on Neverwinter Nights 2, Fallout New Vegas, some other Obsidian games. I was at Obsidian for quite a while. Then I kind of went out on my own for a short while and was on some Kickstarter projects like Pillars of Eternity and then Torment, and then they brought me in full-time to work on this game as lead area designer.
Yeah, very cool. And if people don't know, inXile is led by Brian Fargo, who is, it doesn't get much more heavy hitter than that with pedigree for, computer role-playing games. So, so you guys are working with some, really, really cool folks doing some really cool stuff. Now, a couple of things, George, in fact, I called a buddy of mine last night because I saw that you started at Turbine. Yeah.
Well, I actually started at Westwood Studios before it was eaten by Electronic Arts.
Oh, okay.
And then I went to Turbine right after that and worked on Lord of the Rings Online and D&D Online.
Yep. Well, yeah, I called my friend because I've got a good friend. I think you guys don't know each other because I said, hey, do you know George? I said he's coming on the show tomorrow because my friend Johnny Wood has been at Turbine for years and he works on Lotro and also D&D Online. And he was like, no, I think he left like a year or two before I got there. So, but anyway, yeah, I like some of what, out of all the MMOs out there, I've actually probably played Lotro the most because of Johnny, because Johnny and I run around playing it and stuff like that. But anyway, so, and then you worked on Neverwinter Nights 2, Mask of the Betrayer, and then you've worked on some other cool stuff. So you definitely know your stuff. And thanks again for coming on. Now, Colin, when I was doing some research on your background, you've got a lot of tabletop role-playing game writing credits, but then you've also got a couple of pretty big computer role-playing game credits. So, feel free to kind of walk us through real quick what you do now at inXile and maybe some stuff you've worked on in the past you want to highlight.
Okay, so now I am the creative director the creative lead for Torment, Tides of Numenera, which I got on the strength, I guess, of my work on Planescape Torment, which is what I was... Let me start at the beginning here. So okay. I got my start in gaming by working at TSR, the creators and publishers of Dungeons and Dragons.
When it was still TSR back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Totally old school. So I did that for several years. I created the Birthright campaign setting with Rich Baker, and probably better known, I worked on the Planescape campaign setting after Zeb Cook left. And Monty Cook and I worked on that together for several years, and it was on the strength of that Interplay hired me for Black Isle Studios. I was going to be the lead designer on a PlayStation Planescape game, and then Interplay realized, wait a second, we're working on 3 Planescape games at once here. We probably ought to condense these into one thing. So they sent me over to be the second designer on Planescape Torment. While that was happening, I went and also did some work on Fallout 2. And then we did Planescape Torment, and I left and moved to Michigan. And then I got in touch with Brian Fargo and worked on Wasteland 2, and now creative lead on Torment, Tides of Numenera.
So when you say that you were one of the 2 designers on Planescape, and people, if you don't know, I mean, Planescape is like the Tolkien of, I don't know how to put it, the influence and the belovedness that people have for the writing quality in the game. So first of all, if you never played Planescape and you like computer RPGs, drop everything and go do it. But, it also, I know Chris Avalone was involved in that. Now, was he involved before you, or did he come after you, or did y'all get involved at the same time?
Oh no, Chris was there from the start.
Was he? Okay.
He was the first designer on that.
Okay.
So I was basically playing second fiddle to him the whole time.
All right.
Yeah, no, he had a very strong vision for the game ahead of time, and basically I was helping him make it happen.
Were you able to squeak any of your own stuff in there?
Oh God, yeah.
Cool.
Plus, I got to bring in a whole lot of the stuff that we never really got to do at TSR in Planescape. So I got to make sure a lot of that stuff got included as well. Very
cool. Okay, so both of you guys, I want to expand on Colin. What does the creative lead do for this game? And then 2, do you guys have, both of you, do you have any advice for people that are wanting to break in for writing for role-playing games right now?
Let's see. Well, I hope George will correct me if I misstate anything here. So basically, my job has been from the start to come up with the overall vision and story and idea for what this game is thematically and narratively. I've been, from the start of the project, it was Kevin Saunders, Em Heine, and me. And the 3 of us worked together very closely to come up with this story. We presented it to a group of our writers, and everybody, put their heads down and got together with that. And now we've been through several story iterations, And now mainly my job is reviewing stuff, providing feedback, and writing just a buttload of words.
Well, and speaking of that many words, the last I heard there were over 1 million words of dialogue in this game. Is that true?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's huge.
You guys are like, yep, that's true. Wow.
We don't even, I think at this very moment, we don't even know exactly how many words are in it, but it increases by the day.
So, I mean, how does that compare to, like, for example, Wasteland 2 or even the original Planescape as far as amount of, or even like the new Baldur's Gate game expansion that just came out? I mean, how many words is that in comparison?
Well, it's massively more than most of those games. Colin, you probably know Planescape. I think that was around 800,000. Am I right?
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Wow. That is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, typically one of these games has a lot less words than 1 million. And I've worked on games where, you have to localize and translate and VO some of that stuff. And I mean, fortunately we're not doing a lot of VO, but that would be a monster if we were going to try to VO this whole game.
Yeah, people would be curled up into fetal positions crying, I bet. So if that isn't already happening with just 1 million words anyway. All right. So, and do you have any advice? And I'm talking specifically more to the writing, because, writing for RPGs is a discipline, just like writing for comic books or movies or a novel. If people are wanting to break into the creative aspect of, coming up with the stories or writing, do you have any tips for how people might be able to break in right now?
Whew. Boy, it's been so long since I had to do it. I would say, read a whole lot, so you can get a sense of what people are doing. B, play a bunch of games, and C, practice your writing. And then, when you've got some free time, practice your writing. Okay. You want to do it not just prose stuff, but also dialogue, and then figure out some, basically make up some rudimentary branches. Like, okay, somebody says a blob of text. What would your responses be? And then start practicing branching dialogue to see if that works. Use like flowchart software or something. If you can show that you can branch and create reactivity within a dialogue, that would go a long way toward making people say, okay, you're not just a writer and you can think logically. Right. Yeah. Because there's some actually like, go ahead, George. I cut you off. Go ahead, buddy.
No, I was just going to say, Colin's absolutely right. The other thing, there's a lot of really good tool sets out there today. And actually creating a small game on your own and doing the writing yourself is a really good way to show people that you know how to do this. Narrative design for games is a very different skill than, say, narrative design for a book or a more linear medium. And it takes a particular set of skills. Not everybody, even if you can be a really good writer, not everybody can necessarily do it. So actually just going ahead and doing it on your own is probably the best way to get experience.
Okay, that's a good that's good advice. Now, one final question on this, and then we'll move on more to about the Torment game. Is there like in comic books or in tabletop role-playing games, a lot of the ways to get into quote unquote the industry is to go to conventions and get to know people. Is that a similar dynamic in like go to GDC and meet game company folks, or is that really not part of a dynamic of the game industry?
I mean, it can be, and there are definitely people who go or who try to go that way. I think with mixed results. A lot of times it costs a good deal to go to a GDC. If you don't have any existing contacts at all in the industry, I mean, if you're a really gregarious and charismatic person, it might help you. But if you're not, it's questionable if just sort of sitting in the meetings and listening to people talk. You might learn a lot. I'm not sure if you're going to get a whole lot more prospects for employment. I think actually just doing something, we're trying to get in touch with a small team that's maybe trying to put something together, and then you become the writer on that team. There's a lot of Kickstarter projects out there. That's probably a better way to try to get in than sort of blowing your savings, going out to GDC and just sort of hoping you run into someone. I know there are people who do it and who do it successfully. That's just my 2 cents.
Okay. Yeah, it's going to a convention to try to get a job is somewhat akin to sitting at a drugstore counter in Hollywood and hoping that you'll get noticed by an agent.
I got you. Okay. Yeah. Well, fair enough. Very cool. I hear it's interesting in different industries because like for a long time it may be changing, but comic book people would say go to conventions, meet people, get to know people. So I don't know.
Well, and in comic books, you've also got something that you can show off, though, as well.
Right.
You can say, check out my portfolio.
True.
Whereas, if you show up to show off your portfolio at a game convention, you're going to be, lugging around your laptop, and you're like, here, look at my game.
Yeah. And they're like, and if somebody just happens to be in a good mood, they might. So, all right. At least that's how I'm perceiving it.
Writing's a different skill set than art, certainly. So, but with a written comic book, it's easier to display something like that. With a written game, it's probably easier to make contact online so that somebody can peruse it at their leisure instead of a hurried glance and they're like, "Ooh,
right.
I can't really tell you anything about this."
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thanks for the insight there. There are a lot of people that look up to people that are in the industry and would love to know how do I get in. So I appreciate you taking the time to share that insight.
Sure.
So, and there's always, I guess, as with any job, there's always just a little dash of luck in there too, I would assume. Yeah.
Luck.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, moving on, I want to kind of get more into Torment Tides of the Numenera. Before I do that, I want to introduce this is another groundbreaking day because my wife's actually in the studio with me. The lovely Sheila never gets to come in because we have our kiddo. Well, kiddo's with family this weekend, so we're hanging out today, and she's in the studio. So I just wanted to introduce the lovely Sheila to all my listeners. Say hello, lovely Sheila.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, and she's so pretty. Thanks for coming in, baby. So, and I know you're just riveted by this conversation. She's riveted, guys.
Well, these are intelligent
Is that her actual name,
guys
Lovely
that we're
Sheila?
listening to.
Well, that's how I refer to her, but her name is Sheila. Yeah, but I refer to her as the lovely Sheila. If I ever write a computer role-playing game, she'll be in there as the lovely Sheila. So, anyway.
Is she a fan?
Well, hopefully of me, but I wouldn't say she's a fan of computer. That's what I'm saying. She's just totally riveted, but she did say these are very intelligent guys. So, but yeah, she's one of the beleaguered wives that puts up with me spending a lot of time playing games. So thanks for that, baby. All right. So here we go. Moving forward, got a quick question for you. Now this is actually going to lead off of a quote from Brian Fargo, who is of course heading up inXile Entertainment, and this came out of an interview over on PC Gamer where he was talking with Brian Fargo and Josh Sawyer and Gordon Walton on the history and future of RPGs, and that people can find that link. I found it because of the RPG Codex. They made it a featured link on the front page. By the way, thanks RPG Codex for all you do, and they're good about giving me feedback and stuff on this show. And then also I wanted to give a shout out to the RPG Watch, rpgwatch.com, because they've been kind of sharing the show around when I have computer role-playing game folks on. So thanks to both sites. But here we go. Here's an interesting quote from Brian. He said, "In the past, people had this preconceived notion that we were organized making these games, that it wasn't effing chaos all the time. And you know what? I never had a product that I've ever worked on that somebody didn't say it's completely screwed up, ever. Fallout on down, somebody was saying it's messed up. Nothing's ever gone according to plan in the history of my business." So when they're seeing this, they're thinking, oh my God, right? They're hitting the panic button. But the reality is, welcome to software development. It never goes smoothly. You look at Blizzard, you look at Microsoft. They've got more money and more brains than all of us. And guess how late are their projects? So given that quote from your boss, how's Torment Tides of Numenera looking right now, guys?
It's completely messed up. It's from my perspective, having been on certainly not as many as Brian, but having been on a bunch of projects, it's a very similar track as anything else. There's things that have gone very well, and we're tracking well we have, as we mentioned before, we have tons and tons of writing. There are also things that we wish could have gone better, and we look back and there's some mistakes that we made on certain things. But I think in sum, at the end of all of this, it's going to come together. It's going to come together well. And you have to make cuts. You have to cut certain things to get the rest of the project done. It's kind of the way it goes. But at the end, people don't really know what it is that you cut, and they get the whole game and they like it, and it's a pretty well put together game. So right. I think we're in a very similar case as a lot of these games that Brian is talking about. Right.
Yeah, I just thought that was funny. It's you always at some point you're like, oh, this is going just horribly wrong, but then it comes out okay. So all right. And speaking of being on track, originally, and first of all, you guys did a Kickstarter for this game, and I think we're just looking for $1 million. and then you ended up with like $4.5 million. So you had a lot of stretch goals that you needed to hit. And originally you were thinking maybe a 2014 release, then you were thinking maybe 2015, and now we're looking at a 2016 release. Are we still on track for a 2016 release, do you think?
Yeah, we're still targeting 2016. It's looking good.
Okay, good. Do you have, and I know that, even if you may not want to share it yet, do you have a rough idea of like a month or a quarter when that might happen?
If we did that, people would come to our houses and cut our throats in our sleep. To the mob of torch bearing fans. Yeah, I understand. I'm actually thinking about our producers.
Your producer? Okay, I got you. All right. Well, hey, we're gonna take a quick break. This is radio, so we got to pay the bills. When we come back, I'm going to get into. I'd like to talk about how it came to be the Numenera game system. That fascinates me because I'm pretty fascinated with the Numenera system and the Cipher system and all that. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, I kind of want to talk to you guys about how it ended up being the Numenera game engine that this game is using. So when we come back, we'll have more with Colin McComb and George Ziets, right? George Ziets on Shane Plays Radio, a journey into the things we love.
Hold on to your butts.
June 11th to 12th at the State House Convention Center in Little Rock, the River City Comic Expo is Arkansas's largest comic, toy, game, cosplay convention and now features the Little Rock Picture Show. Guests for 2016 include Neil Adams, Mike Zeck, James Aubert, Larry Hama, Michael Golden, and Arkansas's own Mitch and Elizabeth Brettweiser, John Lucas, and Dusty Higgins. You'll find booth after booth with artists and dealers representing comics, toys, books, movies, games, and so much more. So come on out to the River City Comic Expo, June 11th and 12th at the State House Convention Center in Little Rock. RiverCityComicExpo.com.
Fairly alarmed here.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
Megawars.net. The classic online space strategy game is returned, bigger and better than ever before. Scout the universe and claim your empire. Construct, customize, and launch dozens of different starships. Battle thousands of opponents online in a team-based competition leading to the ultimate battle of the galaxies. Grab your slot today in one of the most hotly anticipated indie games of 2015. Visit megawars.net and get options only available during our pre-sale event running now. Megawars.net.
The die is cast. Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Troll Lord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or trolllord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions, Castles and Crusades is the original easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or trolllord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.
Hey, welcome back to the show. Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. If you just heard that commercial talking about Patreon, like we are incredibly blessed to have sponsors, and I'm so glad to have them. However, if anybody in the community wants to support, I don't complain, because this, since we do this as a radio show and not a podcast, well, it goes out as a podcast later, but first it's a radio show, it's a little bit different animal. So if anybody likes this stuff and wants to support it, glad to have your support. If not, don't worry about it. I mean, you don't have to pay to listen to the show. I'm just saying, if you like what you hear and want to make sure it keeps going, sure would love to have your support. Now, back to our guests, Colin McComb and George Ziets from inXile Entertainment, who are working on Torment, Tides of Numenera. It's a computer RPG that is a spiritual successor to the incredibly well-known and beloved Planescape Torment, that's often held up as one of the finest examples of, storytelling and gameplay experience in computer role-playing games, period. And it also, I think, was one of the first games. I don't know if it was the only game, but it was one of the first games to really kind of get more into the moral ambiguity. Would you say that's right, Colin? Was it one of the first games to really kind of get into it? Wasn't just black and white, go save the princess, we definitely know who the bad guy is kind of thing?
Boy, I don't know that I want to say it was the first, but it was definitely, I think, it feels like it was one of the early pioneers in that, in saying, okay, what we want to overturn some of the tropes that are happening here. Right. Avalon set out from the start to change it from the big-thewed barbarian swinging a sword, talking to elves and rescuing princesses. He wanted to make it so that it was something that would require a little more thought and depth in the writing and thematically as well. Right.
Well, that style has, come to permeate the majority of computer role-playing games out there, and a lot of games are now reviewed or measured on, how nuanced and, possibly ambiguous are the choices. So I like both. It's kind of like when you're reading a book or if you're watching a movie. Sometimes I'm in the mood for just a good old-fashioned good versus evil romp. It's like, okay, they're bad guys, kill them. And then sometimes I like the more nuanced, where it's a little bit more like there's not always a right choice. You just have to do your best. So, and I'm going to assume that Torment, Tides of Numenera, is more along the lines of you have to make your best way in a possibly morally gray world at times. Is that a reasonable assumption?
I would say absolutely yes.
Okay.
We don't want to tell people that there's an absolutely right way to do things and an absolutely wrong way to do things. And that's, I think, one of the strengths of the Numenera setting is that we don't have the, I guess, alignment made flesh that Planescape had. We have, basically a world that's a billion years in the future that has been used as a trash heap for, countless civilizations. And so it's basically people living here in the ruins of all this amazing abandoned technology, just learning to make their own way in the world as best they can.
Right. And okay, so speaking of Numenera, now the original, Planescape Torment was done, I think, using the Dungeons and Dragons, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition rules, if I'm not mistaken, using the Planescape setting, which was a setting in D&D that, you could go to multiple planes of existence. Torment, Tides of Numenera, I got very excited about from the beginning for two reasons. One, hey, more Torment. This is cool, and two, I was absolutely excited to see a major computer role-playing game using the Numenera / Cypher System game engine from Monty Cook Games so early. It hadn't been out that long. So I was like, wow, I get to do it because I love to play computerized versions of tabletop role-playing systems to see how they translate to the computer experience. So, how did that happen where, given how young, and I'm not saying it was a bad choice, please don't mishear me, but given how young the Numenera game system is compared to, for example, D&D or even like Pathfinder or GURPS or something like that, how was it decided that Numenera, the tabletop role-playing game system, was going to be the engine for Torment, Tides of Numenera?
Well, over the commercial break, I actually went through my email to figure out what that sequence was here. And basically, Adam and I had been talking about ideas for the setting since, well, before we ever even announced anything. And as we've been kicking stuff around, Brian Fargo asked us if he should, really go to bat and trying to get the Planescape setting or not, if he should expend a lot of energy on that. And while it's true that in many senses I kind of regarded Planescape as, one of my, if not my baby, at least my child.
Right. Because you were involved with Planescape with TSR, right?
Right.
Right. Okay. Then we're talking about the tabletop when the setting was actually created. You were involved with that.
That's right. I was, Zeb Cook created all of that. He's over, I think, at Bethesda now, or ZeniMax at least. But he created this just incredibly masterful world, and I was privileged enough to be able to play with it after he left. So I really loved that. I really loved that setting, but there was a lot of hassle involved with the licensing and the IP, and we'd have to use the D&D rule set. And decided that we didn't really want to do that.
I see.
And around that same time, Monty had invited me to playtest some of the Numenera stuff. And I had been having a really great time with that. And so I kicked that idea out to Adam. And Adam and I looked it over and we debated the pros and cons. And we decided, yeah, great. This looks like it's perfect for what we want to do. So we asked Brian if he could license it from Monty, and Monty and Brian cut a deal, and here we are.
Nice. So now for the viewers at home, if you will, who is Adam?
Adam Heine. He's our design lead.
Okay. And so design lead is to creative lead, like he's actually handling more the technical back end of the game, whereas
systems. I mean, he's all over the place, I would say, right, George?
Yeah, I mean, Adam has tended to handle more of the system stuff, but he's also a writer, so he's done a lot of writing for us as well. So he's kind of been more of a generalist.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's done some area design. He's he's very technically minded, so he's really good at finding flaws in the logic. He's in charge of our tools, basically making sure that our design tool works for the writers. And like I said, he's been invaluable from the start with some of the story ideas.
Nice. Okay, so and by the way, people, if you want to call in, it's 501-823-0965. If you're listening locally or if you're listening on the stream, feel free to call in either way. And you can always tweet me at ShamePlays. So let's see here. Okay, so, and this is kind of, I don't mean this again in a negative way. I'm just curious, to see how it's gone. And before I ask this question, actually, George, what did you think when you first heard that it was going to be the Numenera system and not, D&D, given the fact that, your involvement with like Neverwinter Nights 2 and, you were more familiar with D&D? What were your first thoughts when you found that y'all were going to be working with a different underlying tabletop role-playing or system?
I can't even, it's been so long now, I can't even recall my first thoughts, but I don't think I was especially concerned about it. Working on a new set of rules can actually be refreshing sometimes, because I had worked on a lot of D&D RPGs up to that point. So doing something that's an adaptation of a different rule set is actually kind of a fun challenge. And we definitely have adapted it. I mean, it's not a 100% literal translation of the tabletop rules. And that sort of process of adaptation and figuring out how can we make this work in a CRPG setting, because the challenges are very much different, can be a lot of fun. So I think I was generally pretty positive on it.
Cool. Yeah, I kind of figured it might be an interesting challenge. I mean, I love D&D. I'm D&D from way back in the day, but I love, like, I used to buy role-playing game systems just because I wanted to see how the math worked. So I love looking at all kinds of different systems and playing all kinds of different systems. So this kind of leads into, and again, I don't mean this from a negative standpoint, I'm just curious, comparing the two, at this point in the development, can you say, would this basically have been the same game with the D&D 5th edition rule set, or did using Numenera make it significantly different? So that that what you've produced to date, could it have been done with a different rule set, or is at this point, is it uniquely Numenera and there are things in the game that would have to change if you weren't using Numenera? Now, I'm not talking about story-wise. I'm talking, I guess, more, because you're in the Numenera world, I'm talking more like the game mechanics and that sort of thing.
I think, I actually think it would be a different game if we were using a different rule set. Certainly, I'll put the setting aside for the moment because the setting has also made a very big difference. But for example, in dialogue, we do things that are called difficult tasks, which is very much a Numenera Ninth World kind of a thing. I guess it's actually just a general cipher system Numenera thing. Where it is it's a gameplay challenge that happens in a non-combat situation, where you're effectively rolling dice in the middle of a dialogue to figure out if you can do something, or to try to persuade someone, to try to intimidate someone, to try to leap over a ledge, whatever it happens to be. And we do that a lot in our dialogues, and that has very much shaped the way we have designed our dialogues. I have never designed dialogues in quite this way before. So I would say that aspect definitely would be very different.
So it's got a unique dialogue. It sounds like it's got a unique dialogue system because of the Numenera rule set that no other CRPG has done or is doing.
I don't know if no other game has ever done challenges in dialogue, but certainly we do it. We do it a lot. I mean, a lot of our dialogues are to some extent built around, or at least certain moments of them are built around having these difficult tasks. In Planescape Torment, it was much more about threshold. So it was if I had leveled my wisdom up to 22, then I got to say this cool long answer that has some interesting implications. But if I didn't level up my wisdom to that, then I just sort of had your standard set of responses that that ending would have just been blocked off because I hadn't hit that threshold. For us, anyone can try anything. So all of the crazy things that you can try to say or do in dialogue, you're not limited from attempting to do it. It's just potentially very hard for you if you don't have the right build.
Okay. Very cool. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Colin?
No, that seemed like it was a pretty solid answer. It's I guess I said no.
Okay. All right. So
I was getting ready to babble on, and I was like, hey, no, it's solid.
Oh, well, what? You just revealed, so Secret Level revealed Babylon is in Numenera. I'm going to make a note of that. I'm going to make a note of that right now. So, okay. So what has the feedback from Monty Cook Games been regarding how you've implemented the Numenera game system? Because like George mentioned, it can't be a one-to-one translation because you're not playing a tabletop role-playing game. You're playing a computer role-playing game. Is there anything that they specifically requested make it in, or that they've asked to maybe be changed when they saw early versions of the game? Or have they just kind of been like, now that you've had the license have they just kind of stood back and let you guys do what you needed to do?
They've been very hands off. They've been really generally very good. They've been very good licensors. The feedback they have is pretty positive for us. And when they do have feedback, it's almost always constructive and worthwhile for us to pay attention to.
Nice.
Just recently, for instance, we've gotten feedback that some people were having trouble with classes or with types. The Nano Glaive Jack, because people are like, hey, is that like a class or something? So we're like, yeah, it's a class. Can we call that a class, Monty Cook Games? And they thought about it for a while. They're like, we understand what you're saying, but it's important across the entire cipher system that it remain a type and not a class.
Yeah.
And, that was one of the very few times that they pushed back on us on stuff like this.
And that go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Otherwise, you were saying otherwise?
I was going to say, otherwise the feedback is generally, okay, remember that people in the Ninth World are not Caucasians. We're like, yeah, we know. We're trying to get all our artists to remember that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's fantasy on a whole different level. It's basically, Numenera is basically a game setting inspired by the Arthur C. Clarke quote that any technology significantly advanced is indistinguishable from magic. And there's been the rise and fall of 8 prior technological civilizations, so now you're in the quote unquote Ninth World. But it is interesting that you mentioned that about the class, because we actually had Shauna Germain on a while back talking about Numenera, and she's actually coming on in a couple of weeks to talk about that No Thank You Evil Kids RPG. I'm really looking forward to that. So really enjoy talking with Monty Cook Games. But, she was writing a book as a Kickstarter girl for Numenera, and I said, well, what class is the character? And she goes, no. It just doesn't work that way. So yeah, so they're very into let's not talk about classes here. So You were talking about feedback from the beta. And by the way, I haven't had a chance to play the beta yet. I can't wait to get my hands on this game because I backed Bard's Tale 4 at the level that you also get a copy of Numenera. So I'm like just, eagerly waiting but I've watched like when you guys were on Arvin Elron's Twitch, I watched going through the intro and I've watched some other stuff. It looks great. But now that the Torment Tides of Numenera beta has been out since January, have you significantly changed anything in either the underlying game mechanics or the story based on feedback from players?
I don't think we've changed the story necessarily, but definitely the forum feedback has been extremely valuable on the area design side. We've looked at all the things that players have going through the quests, because it's the first zone, the city of Saga's Cliffs, that appears in the beta, and players, we got all kinds of feedback about this thing was confusing, this part, oh, I wish I could have asked this thing here, oh, this guy should have said this, and that stuff is super valuable to us because internally we've just got people who've been working on this and playing this every day. So we kind of we have some assumed knowledge. We kind of get used to talking to these people and them saying these things. So we're not necessarily able to look at it with fresh eyes. So when these people come in and say, oh man, I wish I could have said this to this guy, we look at that and we're like, yeah, we wish you could have said that to that guy too.
Right.
So we, in fact, just yesterday, I just finished adding something like that, where somebody on the forum said, oh man, wish I could have done this. I was like, okay, now you can do it.
Nice.
So we've done a lot of that.
Yeah, that article I referred to at the beginning of the show with Brian Fargo and Josh Starr, some others over at PC Gamer, Brian talked about these days you can kind of constantly take the temperature of the game as you're going along. He said it's a whole different ball game from used to where you just did the whole thing and shoved it out there and hoped that it all worked out. So, all right, we're about to cut to a break, but I'm going to tease everybody with the question that we're going to answer when we get back. So here's the question we're going to have to address, guys. This is hard-hitting 2020 hardball stuff, okay? All right. Out of the two of you, which one would win in an arm wrestling contest? And after that, would the winner be able to take Fargo? Okay, these are the hard-hitting questions that people tune in to Shane Plays Radio for. When we get back with Colin and George from inXile Entertainment.
And now it's time to give a little love to one of our sponsors. Some Goblins are your friends. Game Goblins is Central Arkansas's premier retailer of Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40K, board games, card games, RPGs, miniatures, and hobby accessories. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. That's 501-224-GAME or gamegoblins.com. Conveniently located at 1121 South Bowman, right on the corner of Bowman and Canis in West Little Rock, and staffed by friendly employees, Game Goblins has expanded their store size, and there's plenty of room for exciting inventory and tables for play space. You'll like that space because Game Goblins has gaming events every day of the week. For all of your gaming needs, I heartily recommend Game Goblins. Make sure to check out their customer loyalty program that rewards you based on your actual purchases. Game Goblins earns your business and keeps it. First-time customers mention Shane Plays and receive $10 off your purchase of $50 or more. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. That's 501-224-GAME or gamegoblins.com. Tell them Shane Plays sent you.
Hold on to your butt.
June 11th to 12th at the State House Convention Center in Little Rock, the River City Comic Expo is Arkansas's largest comic, toy, game, cosplay convention and now features the Little Rock Picture Show. Guests for 2016 include Neil Adams, Mike Zeck, James Aubert, Larry Hama, Michael Golden, and Arkansas's own Mitch and Elizabeth Brettreiser, John Lucas, and Dusty Higgins. You'll find booth after booth with artists and dealers representing comics, toys, books, movies, games, and so much more. So come on out to the River City Comic Expo, June 11th and 12th at the State House Convention Center in Little Rock. RiverCityComicExpo.com.
Fairly alarmed here.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
Megawars.net. The classic online space strategy game has returned, bigger and better than ever before. Scout the universe and claim your empire. Construct, customize, and launch dozens of different starships. Battle thousands of opponents online in a team-based competition leading to the ultimate battle of the galaxies. Grab your slot today in one of the most hotly anticipated indie games of 2015. Visit megawars.net and get options only available during our pre-sale event running now. Megawars.net.
The die is cast. Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Troll Lord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or trolllord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions, Castles and Crusades is the original, easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or trolllord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/Shane Plays.
We're back with Shane Plays Radio, Geek Talk Radio, a journey into things we love. We've got Colin McComb and George Ziets joining us from inXile Entertainment, talking about their upcoming, hotly anticipated computer role-playing game, Torment, Tides of Numenera. So, guys, before the break, we asked a hard-hitting 2020 hardball question that people are just dying to know. So, out of the two of you, which one would win in an arm wrestling contest? And after that, would the winner take Fargo? Come on, guys.
Well, if I could use karate, I could totally do it. But George and I are both fighting guys, and George is both more clever and more subtle than I am. Yeah. So, if it's just arm wrestling, it's going to be George.
Wow.
Shane, you can't see us, but we're both total lightweights, and we're vegetarians too.
Well, yeah, but it's about leverage. You saw, what was that movie with Stallone?
Over the Top?
Yeah, where you turn his hat backwards and he had to get the leverage on the guy. So I'm gonna have to go with Colin's explanation because he went into being clever and all this and that. So we're gonna give it to George because Colin is saying that he would pull the sneaky moves. Okay, so now Fargo walks into the room. He looks like he's got some guns on him though. He looks like he looks a little sturdy. So what would happen?
We're teaming up on him.
Yeah.
You guys are gonna take him down.
Colin would hide in my shirt, and so we could get both of our arms on him at the same time.
Okay. All right. This is the insightful stuff that people want to know. So, all right. Well, that guys, thanks for being a good sport about that question. No pun. Well, no, there's a pun intended on that. So, all right. I got another in the hard-heading question department along those lines. Is there a secret portal in Torment Tides of Numenera where you can teleport to Skara Bree?
Well, if it's a secret portal, it will have to remain secret.
Ah, good answer. That's why they pay you guys the big bucks. All right, moving on to the more serious stuff. So when I talked recently with Beamdog, they came on, it was Amber Scott and Philip Daigle. We're talking about Baldur's Gate, Siege of Dragonspear. Really enjoyed talking with them. They said that they would be totally happy to sell 1 million copies and thought that, that wasn't a given, but it was within possibility. Do you have a target goal for Torment, Tides of Numenera, or a goal you think would be really amazing, but not necessarily a given? Are you comfortable kind of talking in those terms?
If we sold 1 million copies, I would be overjoyed.
But do you think that's within the realm of possibility?
I don't know that either Colin or I is marketing enough of a marketing guy to be able to answer that.
Okay, well, I mean, things have changed. I guess that kind of leads into what is considered a strong selling CRPG these days, and that's what I asked, Beamdog, and he kind of came back and said, well, I don't know, but if we sold 1 million, we'd be over the moon, and I don't think that's completely out of possibility. So I don't really know what's considered a good selling CRPG anymore. So the question's really more along those lines.
I think it depends a lot more on the size and budget of the CRPG. I mean, like something like Beamdog, as far as I know, they keep their budgets relatively low, and they're a fairly small company.
Right.
It's similar for us. So it used to be most RPGs were made by companies that were roughly the same size. So you could sort of make a judgment as to this number of copies is a success. Nowadays, there's RPGs that are made and other games that are made for extremely low budgets. So, just selling 100,000 units is huge for them. Whereas, the bigger the budget, the more you have to sell. I don't think Colin might have more insight than me, but I actually don't know enough about our budget to tell you exactly what a success run would be for us.
And and just so you know, and we don't have to camp out on this question any longer. We've got about 4 minutes left. Radio goes. I always tell people that time is a predator that stalks us all our lives. When it comes to radio time, it goes so quick. But I'm thinking more of the isometric tabletop RPG based CRPG. I'm not necessarily talking, like Fallout 4, that's they've kind of gone, and those are RPGs, but I'm thinking more of the traditional isometric, I'm replicating the tabletop gaming experience kind of thing,
I know Wasteland did pretty well, and certainly enough for inXile to feel really happy with that. Divinity Original Sin, that was a huge success for Larian. Yeah. Sure.
Yep.
Okay. If we could do Larian numbers for Torment, I think everybody would be delighted.
Right. Okay.
If we could do Witcher numbers,
yeah, you'd be over. Like what? Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So here we go. I'm going to kind of get back more into the setting, and like I said, I'm going to have to wrap us here in a couple of minutes. But was not having the actual Planescape intellectual property for this game a real challenge, or did you find that once it began and you're off and running, it was more of the quote unquote Torment part of the game that carries it rather than the setting that it was in? So, I mean, do you feel it's still a Torment game regardless of the fact of whether it's in Planescape or not?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think that we've got our 4 pillars that we set out for the vision doc. The things that we decided would make a Torment game a Torment game. And those would be the thematically satisfying story, a totally different, new, interesting world, a very personal instead of a narrative or instead of an epic narrative, and serious reactivity.
Gotcha. Okay. So go ahead.
I think that the setting is sort of ancillary to delivering that.
Okay. So it's Torment first, setting second, because Torment kind of encapsulates sort of a feel and a tone you're going for the game and an experience. So, and we're coming up to the last couple of questions. Is there anything that you really wanted to make it into the game at this point you realize isn't feasible, and unfortunately you couldn't get it in?
That's the sigh of an experienced game developer.
Yep.
There definitely are a few things. I like. There's one thing I know. We wanted to do more with factions, and I don't know exactly how much of that's going to get in. But there was one faction in particular I wanted to get in that it doesn't look like is going to get in.
Okay, hold on one second, guys. Sorry, guys. I was asking the producer to turn the music down. That's signaling the end of the show. Okay, so what about you, George? Or not George, Colin?
There was a character who I was extraordinarily fond of, who I thought would be just fantastic to have, but we had to make a choice between him and a different character, and we went with the one who was more developed, and I cry about it every day.
You cry like a baby. Wake up 4 hours, sleep 4 hours, wake up crying, sleep 4 hours, wake up crying.
I do.
Yeah.
But, I'm hopeful that at some point I'll get to bust him out, and he'll be able to reveal his story to the assembled.
Amazing. Man, well, that'll be in play. That'll be in Torment Tides of Numenera too. Come on, it's all good. So
keep your fingers crossed.
Yeah, there you go. All right, guys, I got to wrap us. Thanks so much for being on the show. People, go to Steam and get the early access of Torment Tides of Numenera, and you can play the beta right now. Tweet of the week from Kimmy Monte. I hate it when boxing announcers say a boxer is down for the count. I don't care that he loves Dracula. I just want to know who's winning.